to the Israel Connection. I'm Esti Zenati, and today my very special guest is Dalia Ziada. Dalia is an Egyptian award-winning writer and political analyst specializing in governance, geopolitics, and defense policy in the Middle East and the Eastern Mediterranean. Since October 7, 2023, she's been a big supporter of Israel and its fight against Hamas and all the other proxies of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Dalia, thank you so much for joining me today. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you, Esti. The pleasure is absolutely mine. Yeah.
So since October 7th, what has your experience been like as an Egyptian, Muslim Egyptian, speaking, advocating for Israel and speaking against radical Islamists, and where you met with a lot of backlash from the Arab world?
I consider October 7 is not only the day that changed the dynamics of geopolitical complexities in the Middle East, but it is also the day that changed my life. Many people don't know that I started working on Arab-Israeli dialogue long before October 7. I would say about 18 years before October 7. And I witnessed some moments of success and also some moments of failure. I had some very good moments when I thought, like, finally the relationship, for example, between Egypt and Israel is getting warm, and finally we are on the right track towards changing the Middle East into becoming a region that is controlled by pragmatic relations, not by ideological and emotional relations. So unfortunately, this did not last long. October 7 happened and everything has changed after that. Radical Islamists, which we once thought that they were marginalized, got up again on the surface, and now they are the ones leading the public opinion in the Arab world, not only in Egypt, which is very shocking because they have always built on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But right now, the radical Islamists got an even more complex momentum where they are not only acting as, not only capitalizing on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but also on the wider ideological conflict between Iran and the West. They started to use words that we only used to hear on the leftist side, on the socialist side, like, imperialism, colonialism, and these words to justify what they are doing and even attract more and more supporters under the false flag of standing up for Gaza and the people of Gaza.
Yeah. Why do you think we see the current rise in Western support for all of those terrorist groups, for IRGC and Hamas and Houthis and Hezbollah? Why do you think this is happening right now with Western people that have absolutely nothing to do with the Middle East or, with anything that's going on there?
Actually, there are two levels of authority to blame for what's happening in Western capitals and Western universities in general, especially here in the US. One of them is administration, the leadership of the country, and this does not specifically refer to a certain administration, whether it is Democratic or Republic, but I'm speaking about the attitude of the US administration in general. Is that any conflict happening in the Middle East, it's an issue of the Middle East. It's not our issue. It's not an American issue. It's not a Western issue. Okay, this could have been the case with many conflicts that happened in the Middle East, but when it comes to Israel, when it comes to Iran's wave around Israel, no, it's not actually a Middle East conflict. First of all, it's not an Arab-Israeli conflict anymore. The Arab-Israeli conflict has ended years ago. What we are watching now is an Iran-West conflict. Iran versus the West, the Islamic regime in Iran versus Western governments, versus the free world. It's a war by the Islamic regime of Iran on the free world, and even on the people who support the free world, even Muslims like myself. In that sense, the United States needs to understand that it is its war. It is the United States war. It is Europe's war. to defeat, and it is essential to defeat Iran. You know, the Islamic regime in Iran, for example, calls Israel the small Satan. Well, who is the big Satan then? It is the United States. They call the United States the big Satan and Israel the small Satan. So when they attack Israel, they are actually attacking the United States. They are attacking the West. So it's a war of the West. What's happening is Iran needs legitimacy to lead this war. So it is capitalizing on the historical Arab-Israeli conflict that does not exist anymore. And of course is using and pressuring the general public in Arab streets using this narrative of the Arab-Israeli conflict, or even Muslim-Jewish conflict that some radicals invented, which does not really exist. But they invented in order to justify their war on Israel as well. They used that to mobilize Arab streets against their regimes, which actually, if you think about it, it means that Iran is not only a threat to Israel, it's not only a threat to the West, but it's also a threat to Arab countries. And
Right.
if Arab countries are thinking straight, they should be siding with Israel in this war. They should not be waiting for so long to join Israel and help Israel win this war. But
Yeah, it's like
they are not thinking right.
right. Like we see in Iran, we see a lot of people from the Women Life Freedom movement and beyond that are fighting against the regime and are supportive of Israel. And I wish more people around the Arab world would see that and try to think more rationally and actually look at the big picture, because at the end of the day, this radical Islamism is really bad for everybody, for the entire region.
Absolutely.
It's not just for Israel.
It's even bad for Muslims themselves.
Yes.
It's bad for Muslims like me who identify as reformist Muslims or liberal Muslims. Actually, they consider me an enemy too. That's why when I say, I support Israel, I don't only support Israel for the love of Israel, but I support Israel because I know that this is our common war, our war together against this dark way of thinking, this dark thinking of the radicals.
So I know there've been a lot of, I've seen different Muslim voices around the world, especially coming from the Middle East, from Yemen, from Egypt, from Lebanon, from these places, speaking like for Israel and supporting this war against the Islamist regime. And why do you think that group of people decided to come out and voice their support despite of the danger you're all in, I'm sure, from your countries?
Of course. Do you mean people in the Arab world who support the Islamic regime in Iran or in the West?
No, people in the Arab world who support Israel and support their fight against the Islamic regime. Why do you think? Because I know there's a group of those people that have been very vocal. Yes, yeah. And we see some of them online. We see them, on social media, very active. But I know it's been dangerous for a lot of you to speak up. And why do you think? Yeah, why do you personally, and why do you think everybody else does that? What do you think idea behind it?
Yeah, first of all, let me make a statement that may bring some optimism to the hearts of the people listening to us. Actually, it's not only the small group of activists whom you see online or in conferences or so are the ones from the Arab world who are supporting Israel in its war against the Islamic regime in Iran. But actually, there are many. The people who are speaking, who are vocal about it, who have access actually to media outlets like yours, are only the top of the iceberg, I would say. But the rest of the iceberg is huge. At the same time, when I was running for my life out of Egypt, I was receiving death threats from radicals. But at the same time, I was also receiving messages of encouragement and support from ordinary young people in Egypt, in other Arab countries, who are telling me you're doing the right thing, and we wish we can do the same thing as you are, but we are very scared. So actually, there are many in the Arab world who really, especially in the younger generations, who really understand that, at least in the case of Egypt, that the well-being of their countries is very dependent on the well-being of Israel. At the end of the day, Israel is not a stranger to the region. Anyone who reads history, anyone not even reads history, anyone who makes the effort to educate themselves about Israel will be surprised that at least 60% of the Jewish people in Israel today are from the Middle East, are from Arab countries, actually. They were born and grew up in Arab countries, and they had families and properties in Arab countries. And they were pushed out of these Arab countries in the 1960s because of the fascism of the pan-Arabism at that time that was created by Abdel Nasser and his fellows, President Abdel Nasser and his fellows, in order to gain some kind of legitimacy also, unfortunately, for their dictatorships. So now these Israelis are indigenous to the Middle East. They are not strangers to the Middle East. And I am sure, and thanks to the internet, thanks to the availability of the resources, there are many people in the Arab world today who understand this fact and who are willing to cooperate and coexist with the Israelis, because this is the Middle East. This is natural. This is what should happen. And for cases like my own country, Egypt, in Egypt, we have seen, like, when I was young myself, I was like all these useful idiots you are seeing in the West who had very negative sentiments toward this Israel. And it was out of ignorance. I was only 18 years old when I learned it for the first time that there were Jewish Egyptians, for example, living in our country. It was my first time to learn about Judaism, about the Israeli people, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Before that, I was like all of these other people who think that Israel is evil, and I am, when protesting at my campus in Cairo against Israel, I will be doing something good. I'm now standing up for a humanitarian cause in Gaza or something. But then I learned the truth. I educated myself. I started to see the difference. And I think this is crucial. And many people right now in the region, thanks to the internet and thanks to the availability of information, have learned this information already. And they will not be fooled by all the pressures on TikTok, Twitter, and other social media platforms that are trying to twist the truth.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of cases, especially those activists I mentioned online that have been very vocal recently, of people that were radicalized as youth, in their country. And they were taught to hate Israel, and Israel is the devil, and they wanted to kill all the Jews. One of them even almost joined ISIS. Oh. He was in the verge of joining ISIS. And then he had a conversation with someone, and he read a book about Israel, and he said, before I join ISIS, I want to go and see for myself. And he went and saw the country. He met with people. He was there for a few months, and that completely changed his life. Wow. And now he's an activist, and he's the chair of a big Christians for Israel organization, and wow. they're very active. So it's a huge difference.
Of course. Wow. You see, it's all about critical thinking and education, really.
Yep. Yeah, you have to go out and learn for yourself and see with your own eyes, not just believe everybody, everything that you're told. In your opinion, do you believe that there's a chance for the Arab world to recognize and accept Israel as a Jewish state among other Muslim countries, and just live in peace, let it be? Do you think it's possible?
Absolutely. Actually, we have seen a glimpse of that in the year 2020 with the signing of the Abraham Accords. And then that was followed by improved relationships between Jordan and Israel, Egypt and Israel, which are the early signatories of peace treaties with Israel. So we started to see warm up in the relationships, meetings happening, cooperation in economic fields like the natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, for example, also security cooperation in Sinai, negotiations with Jordan about water distillation and water transfer into Jordan. So there were a lot of hope that yes, we can coexist. And as I was saying earlier, actually, the Arab-Israeli conflict has gone. It's not there anymore. What we are dealing with now is how to de-radicalize the general public in Arab countries to make them accept the progress that the leaderships did in terms of improving their relationships with Israel. Most of the Arab countries that worked on improving the relationship with Israel in the past few years did it for mere pragmatic reasons, like economic cooperation, security cooperation, and so. But the general public, usually public citizens in any country, are more emotional. They don't think with their minds, they think with their hearts. And unfortunately, the hearts of the majority public in the Arab world has been blackened by decades, not only years, decades actually, of hatred, hate speech against the Jewish people and against Israel in the media, in the textbooks, in the schools, in even in mosques, up till today, in mosques, in Friday sermons.
Yeah.
When you go to the mosque to pray, each Friday there is a stable prayer against the Jews. It's a cursing the Jews, literally cursing the Jews. In almost all the mosques all over the region. Perhaps the United Arab Emirates is the only country that started to change this. But other than that, it's happening all over the region. So with this all happening, it's hard to bring the general public on the same foot with their governments, when it comes to approaching Israel, because the government is thinking from one level and the general public are thinking from a completely different level. So we need more effort in hopefully after this war, or even I think we should start from now. We should not wait until this war is over. We should start from now about educating the general public about all of this stuff, so to prime them, to prepare them for accepting Israel as part of the region, which it really is.
Yeah, and what do you think? How do you think we could eradicate kick out the radical Islamists and all of the terrorist organizations? And I know it's going to be hard. It's a decade-long war, a decade-long fight against that. But is there a way, do you think, from your knowledge, from your studies, is there a way that we can at least weaken them to make sure that the Arab population around the world doesn't learn from them, that doesn't take their radical ideologies and
actually it's a very good question, because when we try to answer this question, we have to go back to the roots of why these radical Islamist groups appeared in the Middle East in particular. They did not appear in the Middle East because the Middle East is majority Muslims, because actually there are other countries like Indonesia, Malaysia, and these countries, for example, they are majority Muslims, and perhaps their Muslim population is as maybe even, it's huge. They have a huge Muslim population, but still they are not as radicalized as the Middle East, as the situation in the Middle East. The real reason why we have radical Islamists in the Middle East region is dictatorships. If democracy was the dominant concept or the dominant way of practicing politics in the Middle East, I am sure these radical Islamist groups wouldn't have find a place to exist, wouldn't have find a gap to infiltrate into the minds and hearts of the people and offer them as a solution. The Muslim Brotherhood, their slogan is Islam is the solution. And they have been going to the people, to the poor people who are suffering, for example, from the ill performance of the government on economy, or offering them services, and they offer them services and tell them, look, Islam is a solution. Vote for us, like bring us in power. And from there they started. They did not start from the top, they started from the bottom.
Right.
So it's very crucial to work on this issue, to see it from this perspective. It's not about religion itself, it's mainly about the atmosphere the dictatorial or authoritarian atmosphere that empowered these groups to exist.
Well, hopefully we can weaken it, I think, if not get rid of it completely, because I think it's going to be a lot harder to eliminate it altogether. But
It's a bigger challenge, I know. Yeah.
Yeah. So you've been partnering with Hillel International since May of this year. What can you tell us about this partnership? What have you done with them so far?
Yeah, actually, I'm very excited for the work I'm doing with Hillel International. They are a great team, and they have been taking me to visit university campuses, to speak to students, to educate them about the Middle East, to create, this kind of cognitive dissonance that I had when I was in their age, and changed my life and changed my perception about the Middle East and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. So far, I visited about 18 university campuses, and even more are about to come. It was really really fun. I mean, to speak with the students, to see how they are thinking, and even discuss complicated issues with them. And it's really interesting that even I didn't. Of course, I spoke to students from both sides, like the pro Israel and also the pro-Palestinian. And it was really interesting to see that the pro-Palestinian students were even willing to talk to me more. Maybe because, I don't know, maybe because I come from the Middle East. I look like them, I look somehow like them. So it's somehow, made them put their guard down and be willing to speak about it, not to feel defensive. Do you know what I mean? Not to feel defensive when speaking with me. And this was great. I think this is also crucial, that these students, most of them, I'm not speaking about the evil ones who are managing them or using them to promote certain ideologies. I'm speaking about the really naive students who are believing that they are supporting Gaza by supporting Hamas, or who believes that Hamas are actually freedom fighters, and Hassan Nasrallah is a martyr fighter that should be honored. So these students need to speak with someone. They just need to see the truth. And once they do, I'm sure they will change. And I've seen examples of some of them starting to question what the narratives that was given to them. So I believe in that sense, the work that Hillel International is doing with me and other speakers is very crucial, because it's somehow helping these students listen to a different narrative than the ones that is given to them about the Middle East.
Right. And do you remember a conversation you had with a specific student that was very anti-Israel, and you made them think a little bit about the situation and maybe try to see it from a different point of view?
There are several, actually, but the most interesting one was actually some kind of a debate between me and one of the students who was a Palestinian American. American from Palestinian origins. And she was like, people are being killed, people are suffering. And she was assuming that I'm not sympathizing with the people in Gaza who are already suffering because I support Israel. In their mind, unfortunately, it's either or. If you are on the side of Israel, this means you are agreeing to the killing of the people in Gaza. But of course not. Of course, I sympathize with the innocent children who are dying under the rubble. But the question is not about this. The question is about how they got there. Why they are suffering this? They did not choose this war. Israel did not choose this war. It is Hamas that selected this war purposefully and committed October 7, knowing that the reaction will be severe. And despite all of that, they did not even care to protect the civilians. On the contrary, they exposed the Gaza civilians to more risk, to the horrors of war even more. So with their blood, they can use their blood as a way to legitimize their actions.
The propaganda tool.
Propaganda, gain sympathy. So they kind of weaponized the bodies of innocent civilians in Gaza, innocent children in Gaza, the same way they brutalized Israelis on October 7th. So it's not, this is the question we need to ask. Hamas has to be held accountable for what it did. It has to be held accountable for October 7. Hamas has to be held accountable for what it put the people of Gaza through. Hamas needs to be held accountable as a government, quote unquote, of Gaza that couldn't protect its people in the time of war and prefer to give the tunnels to Hamas fighters and not to their people. Hamas is the one who should be held accountable in this situation. But unfortunately, the international community is ignoring all of that and is referring or pointing all fingers at Israel, which is actually a country reacting in a way that any country in the world would react if its citizens are attacked in the same way Israelis were attacked on October 7th.
Right. They hold Israel to a double standard. And
unfortunately, yes, they are punishing Israel for defending itself while praising Hamas for committing terrorism.
Yes, it's just insane. But we've seen this throughout the year, that especially on college campuses and the streets of New York and other places, that just people call for the end of Israel, and they cheer on Hamas and Hezbollah and the Islamic Republic, of Iran, and the worst people in the universe. They cheer for them. They make them seem like they're heroes, and it's insane.
Shocking, I know. It's very shocking, but unfortunately also what's happening on American campuses is not new. It has been built up for years and years, starting from, if you remember, about 15 years ago, the start of the BDS campaign on American campuses. This was the start of what we are seeing today. A lot of money has been poured into academia in order to prepare for this moment that we are watching today.
Yep, they've been getting in their, groups, and the universities slowly but surely. They have SJP that, they created it. They said it was a peace movement to protect the Palestinians, and slowly but surely they reveal their true face. But it's too late. They already brainwashed a lot of people, and it's been, it's been crazy this past year. You can see all of that come out and play. Yeah. So you've been writing a lot of books. You have many different books about the subjects. Your latest book, The Curious Case of the Three-Legged Wolf, Egypt, Military Islamism and Liberal Democracy. What can you tell us about the book?
Yeah, actually, I'm also writing a new book right now. It's called Coalition of Odds. And it's mainly about the shifting dynamics of power in the Middle East under the pressure of great power competition between Russia, China, and the United States. So it's also, hopefully I will complete writing it soon, and it will be like my newest. But for now, The Curious Case of the Three-Legged Wolf is the latest book I wrote. It's mainly about the dynamic of the conflict between three key players in the Egyptian political scene. They are the military institution, the radical Islamists, especially the Muslim Brotherhood, and the Salafists, who play political role in political scene in Egypt, and the liberal democracy movement that led the Arab Spring and then was crushed later by radical Islamists, by political Islamists, and by the military. While the military and political Islamists went on their own physical and also political fight in order to gain power or competition over power, actually. And it was a very rough competition that brought Egypt into a very sad place right now, unfortunately. But I mean, and the book covers all of this, and I cover this as an eyewitness myself. I was one of the leaders of the Arab Spring Revolution, and then 2 years later, one of the leaders of the rebellion against the Muslim Brotherhood. In the Arab Spring Revolution, we achieved great success. We brought down Mubarak, but soon after, the political Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, took over the country. Then we went back to the street. We fought again against the political Islamists, the Muslim Brotherhood, and magically we were able to bring them down in only 1 year. We didn't need to stay for another 30 years like we waited for Mubarak. But once this happens, unfortunately, the military jumped in and took over the country. And we ended up now with a situation where the military is in power, not performing well, unfortunately, politically or economically. And the public are very angry, but they are too scared as well to let the military or ask the military to leave power, because this will mean lack of stability, lack of security, and also a potential return of political Islamists, which for many Egyptians is a nightmare.
If people want to read the book, where can they get it?
It's on Amazon, actually. It's available on Amazon.
Okay. So my last question, what do you wish for the Middle East? What do you wish the next year will look like for us?
Oh, wow. It's, like, despite everything, I'm still optimistic about the future of the Middle East, despite all the sadness we're seeing right now and the gloominess. But actually, there are signs of hope. Hezbollah is being destroyed. Hamas is being destroyed. Other conflicts in the region, like in Sudan, in Syria, and so are still brewing. But I am sure as soon as the Israeli-Palestinian conflict calms down a little bit, and also thanks to the great effort of the IDF, the Israeli military, against Iran, we will see some kind of calm in the near future on this front. And thus, this will avail a space for the other conflicts to come to the surface and thus be resolved one after the other. I mean, to come to the front seat, so people will take care of, because otherwise, or what's happening right now is that all of these conflicts are pushed back to the back burner, and only in the front is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, as if it is. Although actually, if anyone understands the Middle East well, you will realize that it's just a very small conflict compared to all the other conflicts in the region. But all the spotlights are on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict right now. And of course, the Iran-Israel war. So as soon as this calms down, hopefully this will give more space for discussing other issues in the region. But in general, I am optimistic. I'm happy Israel is still standing strong, because as long as Israel stays safe, the Middle East will remain safe.
Yes, and we'll stay strong, and we'll keep fighting and until everything is resolved, hopefully.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, Dalia, thank you so much for being here. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It was great having this conversation with you, Esti. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for listening. Until next time.